Turkmenistan used to be a Soviet bloc country, shares hundreds of miles of border with Iran and Afghanistan, has the world's fourth largest supply of natural gas. It's the middle corridor on China's Silk Road to Europe. And we have with us today to talk about this from a real position of experience and expertise, Ambassador Klimow, Matt Klimow.
What I'd like to do is talk not only about Turkmenistan, and I'll give you a peek at this very insular country, but then widen our discussion to all of Central Asia, because that's really where we see U.S. national interests come to the fore. And I could illustrate that, I think, with a few choice stories. As you could see, Turkmenistan is in a rough neighborhood. As Jim mentioned, a long border with Iran, 700 miles to the south. Also to the south, a 500-mile border with Afghanistan. To the north, Kazakhstan, where there was a violent coup attempt in just 3 years ago, as well as Uzbekistan and the Karapalkistan region, where 81 people died in violence in the semi-autonomous region that abuts Turkmenistan. And then, of course, by virtue of the Caspian Sea, Turkmenistan shares a border, if you will, with Russia, its former Soviet master. So as the foreign minister would often remind me, Turkmenistan is surrounded by instability. The government has steered clear of a lot of these troubles by adhering to a strict policy of neutrality. In fact, that neutrality is written in their constitution. But that doesn't mean they don't have political views. And I want to start with a powerful story that illustrates this, and I think not only represents the leanings of Turkmenistan, but geopolitically where virtually all of the former Soviet republics stand today. And let me just take you back, if I can, to May 9th, 2022. And as many of you know, May 9th is when the former Soviet republics and Russia still celebrate the victory over Nazi Germany. And in the capital of Turkmenistan, Ashgabat, they have a beautiful, stunning war memorial that overlooks the entire city and the beautiful Kopet Mountains. And on May 9th, 2022, all of the diplomatic corps, 50-some ambassadors would line up, as I did, with the dean of the diplomatic corps on the far right in the position of honor, and then we would accept greet the president of the country and lay wreaths and flowers. So as we all lined up, the dean of the diplomatic corps in 2022, by happenstance, was the Russian ambassador. Now remember, this is less than 3 months after Ukraine's invasion. And at that point, the future of Ukraine was very much in doubt. So as the ceremony started, the presidential entourage came driving up. The senior elder statesman, the second president of Turkmenistan, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, was hosting the event. He got out of the car. The Russian ambassador reached out to shake his hand, and the Turkmen president walked right past the dean, the Russian ambassador, and went straight to the Ukrainian ambassador and embraced him. That was the most dramatic diplomatic rebuke I have ever witnessed. And I think it illustrates that Turkmenistan, and indeed virtually all of the former Soviet republics, are not puppet states of Russia. The bigger so what question, Jim, what are U.S. national interests in the region, go back to the Silk Road. And in ancient times, the Silk Road was essential to connecting the Far East to Europe and the West. Of course, that has lessened in importance over time because of sea travel and eventually air travel. But that connective tissue, the ground route that connects the Far East to Europe, is still important. And I think that's where the so what lies today. Our strategic interests are not only geographic, but geopolitical as well. When you may recall, Jim, we were West Point cadets many, many years ago. They taught us that there are 6 elements of national power: economic, political, military, resources, population, and geography. And the geographic importance of that region, Central Asia, as well as the South Caucasus, I think is important even today, because of the land routes that are now being opened by virtue of the Middle Corridor. As many of you know, just last month, President Trump hosted a peace signing agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. That was a true breakthrough. And I think that agreement has made Central Asia even more important geopolitically. And I might add that signing in Washington was a real poke in the eye for President Putin. And I think the repercussions of that are going to be felt for a long time. I see the map is on the screen. And you could see the blue routes to the south that show the Far East being connected to Europe by virtue of the sea. But the green route that runs through the center of Central Asia, across the Caspian Sea and on to Europe through the Black Sea and through Turkey, is now called the Middle Corridor. And the peace agreement signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan open up a new dynamic. In the old days, to ship goods from China to the Black Sea, it would take 42 days. By virtue of the political agreements to include the peace agreement with Azerbaijan and Armenia, it now takes 14 days, a dramatic decrease. This is an intermodal middle corridor, primarily rail routes, but it also includes modern highways, ferry routes across the Caspian Sea, and now it could go through Azerbaijan either to Georgia in the Black Sea, or the quicker route would be through the Zangezur corridor that connects Azerbaijan through Armenia to Turkey and on to Europe. Turkmenistan has a role to play in this because the port of Turkmenbashi on the Caspian Sea has greater capacity than all of the other seaports on the Caspian combined. So geography plays a role, but also, and Jim, this is where I think our discussion should center today. There's a second geostrategic importance for the region, and that is natural resources, specifically rare earth elements, critical minerals, and uranium. These resources, which we depend on in the United States as well as in Europe, are in abundance in Central Asia, primarily found in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Right now, those are shipped as raw materials to China, where China has the refining and processing capability that are lacking in the countries where they're mined. A large amount of uranium goes to Russia for refinement and for use. So Central Asia has the potential to displace China, as far as we're concerned, as a resource for critical minerals as well as rare earth elements. Turkmenistan plays a role in this as well, because if we want to encourage Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and the region to process and refine those elements, it takes enormous amounts of energy. That takes a lot of money. But Turkmenistan, with the 4th largest proven natural gas reserves in the world, has cheap energy. So you could see the dynamic, the possibility of fueling cheap energy from Turkmenistan, helping Central Asia develop the capacity to not only continue mining these rare earth elements and critical minerals, but then to refine them and process them, cutting China out of the equation, using the middle corridor, which does not run through Russia. So let me pause there, Jim, and see if you have some follow-up questions on that.
We saw what Russia deemed to do into Ukraine to, try to begin the reestablishment of the Soviet Empire. as Putin has said, and has also said that being one of the biggest mistakes that his country's ever made was the disassembly of that Soviet empire. So with Turkmenistan out there with all of that natural gas, why would they not be, if they're not, feeling very vulnerable to Russia coming in and taking over a country like that with those enormous hydrocarbon resources, as well, of course, as with the other that you've cited, the critical minerals and rare earth and uranium and so forth.
Well, let me talk a little about Turkmenistan, which I know quite well, having served there 5 years. It's a secular country. A lot of people mistake it for being an Islamic republic, which it is not. It is very insular. It has an autocratic government, but there's a social contract there, Jim, between the governed and the people. If you don't criticize the government, life can be quite pleasant. You could travel, you could study abroad. That entrepreneurial DNA from the Silk Road, the ancient Silk Road, is in the genes of almost every Turkmen. They want to be business people. They want to trade with the West. As my opening story indicated, they're not puppets of Moscow. My strong belief is, like most of the countries in the region, they would prefer to keep Moscow at arm's length. For Turkmenistan, with all that natural gas, that's where their Achilles heel lies as well. They have failed to diversify the sale of natural gas. So right now, 80% of all of their exports of natural gas go to China. And that makes them vulnerable to China because their hard currency comes from that sale of natural gas. Now, it's important to note that they are not in debt to China. So they have not fallen for the debt trap like so many countries in the Belt and Road Initiative. But still, without diversifying their shipments of natural gas, that's an important element of their economy, overly important. So they compete with Russia for sales of natural gas. And when I first arrived in Turkmenistan in 2019, my directive from Washington was to be a strong advocate for the development of a trans-Caspian pipeline that would run under the Caspian Sea, connecting Turkmen gas to Azerbaijan and then into the southern gas corridor network, gas pipelines that lead to Greece and onto Europe and through Turkey as well. That never came to fruition. And the importance of it in 2019 was Nord Stream 2, which, as I think all of you know, was blown up with the invasion of Ukraine and the sanctions on Russia and the Europeans trying to wean themselves off of Russian natural gas. Natural gas has become less of an issue, and the EU has made it very clear they're not interested in long-term contracts for natural gas purchases because of their commitment to green energy, which I think is short-sighted. I don't know how they're going to run their industrial base until they make that bridge to a full green energy economy, and that could be years away. Turkmenistan's interested in selling natural gas through other pipelines. Most interestingly, it's a pipeline through Afghanistan, which is part of the TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India Pipeline Consortium. That's been on the books for decades, and only now is it completed through Turkmenistan, and the work is now being done. The construction's underway for the next leg of the pipeline down to Herat in Afghanistan, which is being financed by Turkmenistan alone. That's a problem. With the fall of Kabul and the world placing sanctions on the Taliban government, Turkmenistan is having trouble finding funding to continue the route through from Herat to Pakistan. Getting to India is a whole nother story, but Pakistan surely needs the energy. So it's conceivable this would be a viable way to diversify. I think the Trans-Caspian pipeline is still being discussed, but for reasons that are hard for me to even understand, they never had that handshake with Azerbaijan. They do gas swaps with Iran, which is very interesting because I spent some of my time as a diplomat working with Washington and the Turkmen government to assure the Turkmen that Washington did not find that gas swap to be in violation of sanctions on Iran, and so far it's not. So they ship their natural gas from Turkmenistan into Iran. Iran then ships some of their natural gas onto Europe. And those are relatively small quantities. So pipeline diplomacy, as I called it, was a big education for me as an ambassador. It's pretty fascinating.
I think 80% or more of their gas is now shipped to China. And how does that get to China?
There are three pipelines that run to China, and there have been lengthy discussions about a fourth pipeline. It's called Line D, as in Delta, if you're interested. But as I experienced my 5 years in Turkmenistan, it's so often very slow to get decisions made. It's often 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The negotiations with China have not proved to be successful in getting an agreement for this fourth pipeline to China. In the meantime, Russia has made a very strong play to send natural gas not only to China by the Trans-Siberian pipeline. I know this is all arcane pipeline talk, but also, without getting into a lot of detail, Russia offered to sell gas to Uzbekistan, which really lit a fire under Turkmenistan because they viewed Russia as going into their turf of Central Asia. So, as my story indicated, they try to keep Russia at arm's length. They compete with Russia. China, beyond gas, has not made big inroads economically in Turkmenistan. They're not in debt to China, which is a big deal. But I think the Turkmen are rather ambivalent about the Chinese. They have to deal with their neighbors. But as the foreign minister told me, and as the former president told me, they look to the West for good relations. It's a two-edged sword. China and Russia are close. The United States is far away. That's a disadvantage for us. The advantage is China, Russia are close, and we're not. And the advantage is, of course, the Turkmen, and I think virtually all of the former Soviet republics, are very concerned with the kinds of pressure that President Putin or Xi Jinping can put on them, usually indirectly. Although Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have their GDP and their economy intertwined with Russia's, makes it very difficult for them to keep arm's distance.
Given our need for more critical minerals, rare earth, what if anything, are we, the U.S., doing to try to make inroads there in Turkmenistan, of them becoming a realistic alternative source of those critical needs that we have?
President Berdimuhamedov, which I happened to see in the New York Times yesterday, shows the president of Turkmenistan in Beijing for the big celebration of victory in World War II. He's standing directly behind Putin and Xi Jinping, and with Kim Jong-un off to the side. So, most people wouldn't recognize the president of Turkmenistan, but I saw it right away. I don't take that to mean that Turkmenistan is looking to the east. They have to deal with these major powers in their neighborhood. And by virtue of being a neutral country and walking the talk of being a neutral country, they're able to keep that distance and still keep good relations with their big neighbors. But I think they're interested in keeping relations with us and with Europe alive, and to see that increase, particularly with the United States. For a couple reasons, the EU has become a non-player. One is they're very wary of doing any business with a country like Turkmenistan because of human rights issues. And as I mentioned, the EU has made it very clear they don't want long-term agreements to buy hydrocarbons. So I think the United States has to step up to the plate if we're not going to cede this sensitive geopolitical region to Russia and China. I should mention that I'm on the board of advisors to the Caspian Policy Center in Washington. It's a think tank. I had the opportunity to travel with them in June to Azerbaijan and to Nagorno-Karabakh, the region that was fought over between Armenia and Azerbaijan. A fascinating visit, and it really brought to life how important this middle corridor is now that Armenia and Azerbaijan have shaken hands. But there's an article I read just this morning warning that the United States has to water the seed that it's planted between these two countries, or it will wither, not because of anything that Azerbaijan and Armenia do, but by virtue of Putin focusing on this agreement, which has really lit a fire under him. So I think the United States has to make sure that this agreement and our involvement in it continues to keep that alive. The rare earth elements, the critical minerals, those are long-term investments. And getting the countries in Central Asia to turn their attention to refining and processing, so they're not shipping them off to China, is going to require the United States to take an active interest in making this happen, and Europe as well, of course. It's in our vital national interests to have sources of rare earth elements and critical minerals that we can rely on. That region has them. So if we sit back and watch, I think we're going to lose a strategic opportunity. I was there in Turkmenistan when Kabul fell. And also it's an illustrative story. I went to the foreign minister on Sunday and said, can I get your okay for overflight and landing rights for airplanes, US military airplanes that are helping to evacuate Kabul? And without hesitation, the Turkmen foreign minister said, yes, we just want to keep this low key without a lot of fanfare or publicity. So Turkmenistan came through for us when needed. I think the sad thing about your question is how little we now talk about South Asia and how important it was before the fall of Kabul. And I think it's, if we as a leading nation in this world want to be taken seriously, then we need to show our commitment to our friends and allies. Once things don't turn out the way we wanted them to, in this case in Kabul, to keep our interest in seeing the region mend those wounds and find ways to keep South Asia, to include that route we talked about through Afghanistan to Pakistan and on to India, is a viable route without giving an inch to the Taliban government that is anathema to our values and principles. So how we demonstrate that, there are many ways, but largely indirect. What I saw is how quickly we forgot about South Asia once a friendly government was not in place. And I think it's in our interest again to make sure South Asia doesn't become a breeding ground for terrorism, and then to help those who helped us, whether they be refugees or migrants or people who are still in country who would like to see a better day.
I mean, we have Turkmenistan that has this enormous amount of natural gas, and they're selling a lot of it to China. They also are possessed with these critical minerals and rare earth and uranium. And they're a country of about 7.5 million people, I think, without I'm not knowing this for sure, but a lot of overlaying commitment of their income for entitlement programs and even military and so forth. So why have they not taken steps themselves to further diversify their economy by setting up the refinement of these other assets themselves? Do they not have enough capital, even though they're selling all of that gas? Or what is the reason they haven't done it? Do they lack human capital as well?
I'm glad you mentioned the human capital, Jim. My wife Edie and I were just so impressed with the young people we engaged with. And as ambassador and with my wife, we invested enormous amounts of energy, time, and attention to the young people of Turkmenistan who are eager to know about the United States, who want to study abroad, and then come back to Turkmenistan, which is a very familial society, and prosper in their own country. So the human capital is there. They don't have a mining industry per se, but they have the cheap energy that would allow them to power some of that refinement capability, but probably in neighboring Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Why they haven't diversified their economy more is difficult to explain. So many times we would sit in the embassy and scratch our heads because their decision making appeared to us to be obtuse or not transparent. We would see opportunity, and I would often think they saw they were on the precipice of making a decision, and they would say to themselves, "Thank goodness we didn't decide, because who knows what would have happened." So I told my embassy staff, our job as diplomats is to scratch the surface. They have a logic as to why they make decisions. We need to figure out what it is, because to us, it didn't seem apparent that it was in their best interest not to make the leap. Not to make the leap to diversify their natural gas sales is the best example. Their economy is stable. They have probably close to $50 billion sitting in European banks, and they bring that money back to the country when they need it. As I mentioned, there's something of an informal social contract that they want to make sure that their people are taken care of, as well as their neighbors. They sell subsidized cheap electricity to Afghanistan. They provide food to Afghanistan's northern provinces, all for the sake of stability. And if you look at their logic, Jim, their decision-making is based on stability, not only within the country, but with their neighbors. So the invasion of Ukraine, for instance, in 2022, just was so destabilizing and so upsetting to them that they came to me and said, we look to the West for the reassurance and the stability that you can bring. So we should take advantage of that. The natural gas is a commodity that won't forever be valued as it is today, especially if you look at it from the view of the Europeans, who are working really hard to divest themselves of hydrocarbons. So, I encourage them to look to the West to make sure that they diversify their economy for the sake of stability, because it's in our national interest to have a stable region. I really can't tell you why they haven't made some of those big decisions, other than they're very cautious, very conservative. I think if we are there, and we have a beautiful brand new embassy complex, it is a symbol of our commitment not only to Turkmenistan but to the region. I think we offer them an alternative to looking to the east.
I think I know that a great amount of the country is desert terrain. Uh, but there is a water issue, and I don't know whether it relates to creating more agriculture or just domestic consumption, but they are right there on the Caspian Sea. What is the water issue there, Baster?
That goes to the heart of instability, because short-term instability can be caused by mischief that Putin can make, not directly, but indirectly. And for sure, ISIS Khorasan in neighboring Afghanistan. And they spend a lot of time worrying about radical Shiite Islam being exported from Iran. And as they told me in no uncertain terms, they have no patience for Shiite militants. So their relationship with Iran, their neighbor, is functional, transactional. It's not particularly warm. When it comes to water, that's the big long-term source of potential instability. And there are three things that I would point out. First, the 80% of the water that flows into Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan comes from the melting glaciers in Tajikistan. And those glaciers are melting at an alarming rate. So in the short term, there's going to be substantial water flow. But in the long term, as those glaciers disappear, and they are disappearing, that's an existential threat for both those countries. But more immediate is Afghanistan. The Taliban are constructing and are well underway in their construction of a huge dam and canal project. It's called Gosh Tepe, Qosh, Gosh Tepe. That has the potential to divert 25% of all the water that flows through the Amudarya River, the primary source for the canal system in Turkmenistan as well as in Uzbekistan. So you could bet the Uzbeks and the Turkmen are paying attention. They deal with Afghanistan separately, but Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan have been cooperating in their approach to Afghanistan and the Taliban in helping to find some solution sharing that water. I have to say, I would have been somewhat skeptical about how serious this threat was if not in my own lifetime. We have seen the diminishing of the Aral Sea, which is now mostly desert, which was once one of the largest inland seas or inland lakes in the world. So it could be devastating for Turkmenistan as well as Uzbekistan if this Gosh Tepe project diverts that much water. And then finally, Jim, there's the Caspian Sea.
Yeah.
In recent years, the sea level of the Caspian has diminished noticeably, almost alarmingly, to the point where they're now looking at how they have to dredge some of the seaports on the Caspian Sea because the water line is starting to deteriorate, and that is because of Russia. The primary source of water for the Caspian Sea is the Volga River, and Russia continues to divert water from the Volga River, and that's going to cause problems, I think. And one of the last meetings I had in 2024 before I departed Turkmenistan and talked to the foreign minister was about U.S. support or lack thereof for the pipeline, which now runs through a sanctioned country. Of course, the sanctions are detailed, but the challenge for Turkmenistan in completing the TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, are both political as well as geographic. Before the fall of Kabul, the Asian Development Bank was funding the construction of the pipeline. After the fall of Kabul, ADB, the Asian Development Bank, because of the sanctions on the Taliban, stopped their funding for the project. The Arab states, particularly the UAE, have shown some interest in the Islamic Development Bank, but finding backers to pay for and fund the consortium to go from Herat all the way to Pakistan is one issue. And then from Herat to Pakistan, you're going through mountainous regions where the pipeline construction itself will be long and difficult. So it is not only the current president's initiative, but his father's initiative, the second president, and they want to see it through. Whether they get the capital to do it and the political and engineering backing to do it is still to be seen. There is no high-speed internet in Turkmenistan on purpose. One of the few countries that doesn't want it. Now, the elites have VPNs, and there are ways to allow businesses to access some high-speed internet. But for the average citizen, you have to work at it. It just goes back to being an autocratic, conservative country that is very insular. So I spent a lot of time with our 4 cultural centers, one in Ashgabat and the other 3 in the provincial capitals, where we allowed people to come in and use high-speed internet. Look, they're teenagers, they're college students, university students. They have VPNs. They know what's going on in the West. They could get visas to travel. They're hungry to know about what America is, what our values are, all the things that teenagers around the world are interested in. And that entrepreneurial spirit extends beyond their borders as well. These are business people who know if they want to expand their businesses, they've got to do business with the West and not just with the East. So notwithstanding the very restrictive environment for conducting business with the absolute free flow of the kind of interactions we know in the West, it's a little more difficult, but they work at it. I think one of our strongest, for me, my strong right arm in getting things done as a diplomat was our public diplomacy programming in our cultural centers, which, by the way, our 4 cultural centers in Turkmenistan, sponsored by the State Department, are the most subscribed and used of any country in the world. Of course, that's a backhanded compliment because they're so subscribed because it's so difficult for young people to find out about the West otherwise. Now, in terms of imports and exports, one of the biggest icons of America is also one of the biggest icons in Turkmenistan, and that is John Deere. So they buy a lot of John Deere, Case New Holland harvesters. They have cotton harvesters. They have wheat harvesters. They love to show pictures of John Deere because that to them is quality. All of Turkmenistan airline fleet is Boeing, and they're very, very proud of that. There's actually a Boeing office in Turkmenistan. And many smaller American companies are there as well. There's a Jack Nicklaus golf course. And Jack Nicklaus himself spent a lot of time in Turkmenistan, believe it or not, making that golf course. So they want big name, well-recognized American companies. America imports, the biggest import is fertilizer and urea. And the urea is such high quality that I've been told many times American companies will buy all they can get, and they can't get enough of it. But there's a trade surplus for the United States, but it's small. We're talking about both products and services amounting to maybe just $150 million, which is a drop in the bucket for most countries. But I'd rather have American business people coming there than people from Russia. My wife Edie and I were always so excited to go to a cafe and overhear English being spoken, and American tourists are there. It's very difficult to get a a visa as an individual. You have to be sponsored by a tour agency, but there are a lot of tour agencies, and it is on the Silk Road. The archaeological sites alone are worth the visit. There's the famous gas crater, which you could Google, Darvaza, and for adventure tourism, that's a big draw. But your taxpayer money has helped to fund the restoration of many ancient Silk Road sites through the Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation. And it's a beautiful, beautiful country. The Kopet Mountains, beautiful desert scenes, and warm and welcoming people. As an American, you will be embraced. Business people, there is a U.S. Turkmenistan Business Council, a USTBC, U.S. Turkmenistan Business Council. It's a private organization. There is no AmCham, or wasn't when I left. We were trying to get that going. But to do business in Turkmenistan, you have to be pretty savvy. There's that hangover of Soviet bureaucracy that still exists. There's a dual exchange rate that is 5 times the official exchange rate. There's not wholesale corruption like in some countries where the elite steal all the money, but there is corruption, petty corruption, and you have to be able to deal with that. So navigating that for business people takes a savvy hand. I hope that gives you an inkling of both tourism and business, and go visit. It is amazing. You'll always thank me for steering you there.